Good evening, Jack. Yeah, that's right. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It is kind of my neck of the woods. I wrote for NK News for a while. I have a master's in Asian studies, and my PhD in international studies was written on North Korea and its diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom and the international community. So I'm a doctor in it officially, but yeah, that's how it is. All right. Technically still at war. Yeah. Mm. Not Jesus either. Yeah, he didn't. He's met with President Moon has met with Chairman Kim Jong-un 3 times now, officially, I believe.
Jeez. Okay, now you can hear me. Blame me. I had myself tuned off. Great.
Okay.
And so there are talks of reunification, and you know the parties have been playing back and forth, ping pong, left and right. Nobody really knows what's going on anymore. But there is a lot of stuff about North Korea on the news.
Right.
So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. You are the man with the inside scoop, I guess, maybe, or the hand on the finger on the pulse. So do tell, like, what's in the news? There's a lot of North Korea stuff happening, being talked about on the South Korean news. What is it? What are they talking about?
Well, let me just take you back. And first, I think I disagree with your assertion that expats, let's say, or immigrants, whatever you want to call them, people, foreigners living in South Korea, regarding their interest in the news. Local Koreans are not really that interested in the Korean problem.
Okay.
To them, it's just a Thursday or a Friday. You might find that more ink is spilled in the newspaper and more attention is paid from the foreign community because it's an industry, actually. It's people make money off giving their ideas and their opinions on North Korea. And that's the worrying thing, because people actually like the tension. The media like the tension because not only does it get clicks, it sells and it helps the news channels go round. For the most part, the locals, to my experience, they're kind of bored of it. If you ask the person in the street, you want to talk about North Korea, they're not really going to want to sit down. For a lot of South Koreans, there is only one political policy, and that's the North Korean policy, because ideas on sort of gay marriage or anti-discrimination, well, both political parties, or the two main ones, they seem to have similar ideas on that. Ideas on universal basic income, or what should be given in social security. The major parties seem to be kind of agreeing on those things. Where the two political parties really do draw a line, Japan is one of the issues, but another one is North Korea. And so it's either pro-engagement or anti. So if you do discuss North Korean actions in the last days or so, or at any point, you're kind of asking South Koreans, who do you vote for? And that's a very difficult question to ask South Koreans. You're not meant to talk about those things. In general, everybody's different. I shouldn't generalize that too much. But when you talk about North Korea, you are essentially getting which side of the political line they are on. And it's the same. You said you don't watch the Korean news. I do. And depending what channel you want to watch, so if you're watching Yonhap, or if you're watching JTBC, if you're watching NBC, you're going to get a different slant, just as you would if you were, let's say, in the United States watching Fox or CNN. If you're in the United Kingdom watching Channel 4 or BBC and various other countries around the world, they all have a political bias, right? And they have an audience to which they tailor their message. And it's exactly the same in South Korea. So you turn on one TV news and you'll find, yeah, unification's the dream. Kim Jong-un's not a bad guy. He wants to reform. It's generally just the problem of the Americans. We've got to sort them out. And that will be the message. And you put on another one and the message will be, no, we shouldn't trust North Korea. What are they doing? They're blowing stuff up. They're bombing and they're blowing up buildings, I should say, the Kaesong liaison office. So the news differs. The news in South Korea is not monolith. It does have that divide, as you would expect anyway. Are Koreans really interested in the North Korean issue? Well, they're interested in it because it affects President Moon and his legacy as the president of South Korea, because he's put a lot of effort into this. He's really gone after Kim Jong-un and peace. And we've seen photos of President Moon on top of Baekdu-san with Kim Jong-un doing love hearts and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Which is a big thing. President Moon took the Chaebol leaders up there. He got Lee Jae-young, the Samsung, to be leader out of jail, took him up to North Korea, up to Baekdu-san, all the love hearts. And after all of that, if it turns out that Kim Jong-un and his younger sister Kim Yo-jong and the Workers' Party in North Korea, if they're going to just back away and just say, thanks very much, but we're done. And some of the language that they've used towards South Korea, the international community doesn't see it, but some of the language that North Korea uses about South Korea in Korean is not very nice. It's not something that you would say to your grandmother around the table. But this is what the North is saying, and so it really doesn't reflect well on President Moon's legacy if that's what he's aimed for. And so what I notice is that a lot of ardent President Moon supporters, and of course he rightly so has some of those, for the feeling of goodwill that he's given to the country, for the help that he's got coming through this COVID-19 situation, the supporters of President Moon try to defend the North Korean situation because then they're defending President Moon. Mm-hmm. And the people who are opposed to President Moon, they will attack North Korea and make the situation out to be much worse because then it attacks President Moon and his political party. So that's the kind of situation in which you find yourself in Korea looking at all this. It's very political, Jack.
Right. So it's no wonder, well, it's not that much different, I guess, than any other news outlets, as you said, back home, right? Depending on the channel that you turn on. So right before we sat down, I watched the Korea Times posted a video and they interviewed a bunch of young Koreans and basically asked about their opinions. And their opinions pretty much reflect what you just said, that there's a lot of confusion and, you know, people have confounded opinions about what North Korea actually wants. There's a lot of young South Koreans who are confused about what North Korea wants. Some would like to see the two parts of the peninsula reunified. Some think that North Korea is up to no good. And so I guess, yeah, it's a bit of a strange situation. There's a lot of...
This is the problem, Jack. Let me just say about the young South Koreans, because I teach them. I've had about 400 undergrads. Well, I've taught about 400 undergrads this last semester, and I'm teaching at the moment in political science, world history, Korean studies, all these courses. And what I've discovered, and this is not just about Koreans, this will be general education, but young South Korean undergraduates that I've taught, they don't really know what North Korea is, and they don't really know about the history. And therefore, any of the conclusions that they reach aren't really based on a great deal of information. It's not really based on the facts. What I found recently in South Korea is that there is a desire to sort of rewrite history. The two parties, they have very different views on history. They have different views on when Daehanmin국, the Republic of Korea, started. They have different views on what happened in Gwangju. They have different views on the 1965 normalization with Japan. And therefore, a lot of young Koreans, they kind of get their image of North Korea and their information through movies and through drama. And this is good because it gives them something, but it doesn't give them anything close to reality.
Right.
You had Mr. Sunshine about the Japanese colonization. Many people will have watched that and gone, oh, wow, that's Japanese colonization. But it's a drama. And it's a drama portrayed to send a certain message. And they'll watch Taxi Yunjeonsa, a taxi driver, about Thomas Hitzberger, the German journalist down at Gwangju. Wonderful film with Song Kang-ho, great acting, but it's a drama. It's not actually what happened. And these movies that are made, they have a very simple narrative, good guy and bad guy, and they paint history as very simple for the most part. History's not like that. History can't be told through the lens of they're the good guy, or we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. It just doesn't work like that. So when you talk, it's not that simple. Like, we don't really know what history is. History is always being constructed by us at the moment. And yet, when you ask the South Koreans, when they give you their opinions, which are their genuine opinions, which should not be discounted, I always find that they don't really know too much about what North Korea is, first of all, how they would describe it, and B, any information about North Korea in terms of, I'll show them pictures of Pyongyang and they'll go, no, David, that's what he's showing me. That's not North Korea. That's not what I learned. And we sometimes know more about it because they've spent their whole life growing up not looking at images and pictures of North Korea because it could be illegal. Since the 1961 National Security Act, you can't say anything nice in support of North Korea in South Korea. It's illegal. So their opinions, absolutely valid and worthwhile, and there will be some that know, but the general lack of information makes me think what is missing is better education and discussion on the subject. They don't really allow it to a certain extent because they're worried if they do, then the truth comes up. And the truth is uncomfortable. The truth might not be liked. Every country around the world, bar South Korea, the United States, France and Germany, most other countries you can think of, have diplomatic relations with North Korea. They say, you're a genuine country. We've got diplomatic relations with you. United Kingdom has an embassy and an ambassador established. And these embassies and these ambassadors, they tweet from Pyongyang and say, this is our life. We live here. We respect the North Korean government and we think they're legitimate. South Koreans don't know that. Why don't they know that? It's not a big secret.
That's interesting. Before we move on, I just wanted to, Elizabeth Kim, for the listeners, if you're turning in right now, Elizabeth Kim, just let me know that the beginning of the podcast I had myself tuned off, and I was just introducing David Tizzard, who agreed to join us today and talk about North Korea on the news here in South Korea, and that's what we're discussing. In relation to what you're saying about people not really here, and so the young South Koreans not really knowing what North Korea is. There was one girl commented on the leaflets that North Korea was, I guess, flying out into South Korea. I don't know if that happened. Did that actually happen or not? I've not seen any of those leaflets. I would have loved to see them. So I don't know if they were just shot out over Seoul, I guess. it would have been over Seoul.
Most of these leaflets go up from the Gangwon province, close to the border, places like Paju. And these leaflets have been going for a long time. These leaflets have been going back and forth, so they're not new.
Okay.
And they're quite sexual in context. Sometimes they'll have images, but they go both ways. And the recent situation has come to the fore because South Korean NGOs, some of them funded by American taxpayers, have been filling balloons with rice and Bibles and messages and floating them into North Korea. A lot of these NGOs might be run by North Korean defectors. They're essentially trying to get a message inside to the country saying, hey guys, come out, here's rice and Bibles and all these good things. Kim Yo-jong, Chairman Kim's younger sister, came out and said, this must stop. We don't want this happening. You're putting balloons into our private space. And South Korea responded immediately. They immediately went, okay, we're very sorry, and we will stop our citizens doing this. And then they passed a few laws. I believe they put Kim Dae-jung's son in charge of these laws, Kim Dae-jung being the instigator or the creator of the Sunshine Policy. And they essentially did what North Korea wanted them to do. They said, all right, we'll stop our citizens doing that to protect you. So they adhered to North Korea's request, and the request was given in very bellicose and belligerent language. This causes the argument, and a lot of people said online, why are we restricting the free speech of South Korean citizens in order to protect North Korean citizens?
Right. This
is a very interesting thing because North Korea has a kind of totalitarian control on the release of information in its country. The scholar down in Busan, Brian Myers, he posits that there are three tracks of information. One which the North Korean state just gives to its citizens and nobody else sees it. It's in Korean, obviously. Another one that they kind of give to South Korea, to the outside world in Korean. And a third channel that they give to the international world. So they control their information. You can't be a private journalist. You can't do UCC. You can't do this, Jack, in North Korea. So they control everything from top to bottom. Whether that's acceptable, I think that's a normative, subjective opinion. We all want to live in free, open societies in which we get the ability to express ourselves. But that exists on a sliding spectrum, doesn't it? Some countries are more open than others, and it's not just black or white, but it's 0 to 100. And some societies are very open. The United States is actually really open. When people say, oh, the United States is a fascist tyranny, I completely don't get it, because you actually saying that proves that it's not.
Right.
You don't get Chomsky in a fascist country. You don't get Susan Sontag. You don't get dissidents in these countries, or you do, but they don't live. They get sent off to Gulag. So
yeah, right, exactly. That's pretty much what Chomsky says as well. The exact same position.
That's just the logic of it. But the recent ones came about through the North Koreans. They want to control information inside their state and what their citizens see. Now, do we have any right to tell the North Koreans how to live? We might not like it. We might think that sucks. We might say, well, human rights and let's do all this. But what right do we have to tell them to do anything differently? Right. If they're a legitimate sovereign nation, and most countries around the world believe that, South Korea doesn't yet. I mean, for all the talk and all the lovely peace hearts and things from South Korea over the years, from Kim Dae-jung, Roh Moo-hyun, and now President Moon, they've never signed diplomatic relations with North Korea. They've never put an embassy there. They've never had day-to-day relations like England, Germany, Sweden, China, Russia. They talk to each other every day. The South Korean approach seems to me sometimes, and this is maybe a dangerous observation, but these meetings between, let's say, President Moon and Chairman Kim, they simply serve to put the leaders of those two countries into the history books. It doesn't actually go towards unification. It further cements the division because it legitimizes them as the individual rulers of their own states. It doesn't bring anything closer. Their own positions get stronger as divided people. So I think if the country was really interested in doing something about unification, it would open up genuine discussion amongst the young people about what North Korea is and the reality going on. And it would say, okay, enough with all the presidential photos, and we'll just have day-to-day diplomatic work and see how it goes from there.
Right. So, yeah, there are a couple of points I wanted to make. On the I guess the leaflets I was mentioning, one of the girls that was being interviewed, one of the young Koreans here, mentioned that the language that was being used on the leaflets was kind of outdated. And I guess that would kind of speak to, I don't know, again, like you just said, maybe that's done purposely, maybe it's not. But I guess it would suggest, I don't know, South Korea, I mean, South Korea is a developing country, right? It's developed, the language is developed, so having young people read Korean that is coming from North Korea and not really, and being surprised by the language that's used, kind of shows how different the countries are and how little people know about North Korea, right?
I'm not really sure about that. I mean, if you read work by Baek Ji-yoon and things like this, it is suggested by the scholars and people that research it that North Koreans watch South Korean dramas. North Koreans have these things on USBs, and they like them, and you can get in trouble for using South Korean words or expressions.
Yeah.
Because if you say certain things, so the North Korean language that comes over, because it's propaganda, it's highly stylized. Mm-hmm. They could do it in English, they could do it in Russian, they could do it in what they want. I mean, we had the word dotard come out, mm-hmm. right? And all of a sudden everyone's reaching for their dictionaries to work out President Trump's dotard. What's a dotard? We need to look at all this stuff. And some of the language, of course, it's not the language of the South Koreans, but it shouldn't be. Nevertheless, it's not North Korea essentially being out of touch, I don't think. It's them creating their own message without adhering to what's cool in South Korea. One of the previous ambassadors, British ambassadors to North Korea, John Everett, he would say that whenever they were doing translations into English over agreements and documents, whenever the North Koreans would argue over words, he would just tell them, well, actually what you want here is the American expression, but I'm trying to give you the English expression. And so the North Koreans would always agree with what he said because they didn't want the American expressions. Okay, we'll go with the British one. That sounds nicer. Language is political. George Orwell was right. Language is political. And
Absolutely.
The things that come out from North Korea are like that. More interesting to me than the flyers is this. North Korea now releases YouTube videos in English about life in Pyongyang.
Yeah, right? that is super interesting. But I mean, all that stuff is catered to as well, right? I've watched a bunch of documentaries, some of them questionably legitimate, by Russian actors coming in, sneaking in cameras. And I always wonder, are these people actually going into North Korea, sneaking in the equipment, or have they been, hired by the government there to kind of, come away with a certain impression of what it's like to be there, the undercover reporters.
No, I think you misunderstood me. This is not people going into North Korea. This is North Korea, instead of giving flyers and sending these across the DMZ, it now makes YouTube videos and it puts them out on Twitter, on YouTube. Cold Noodle Fan is the Twitter handle that seems to be run by their propaganda department. But the interesting thing is, these videos that they make are in English, featuring women and featuring young elements of Pyongyang life. So they're trying to give this message. Of course it's propaganda, of course it's a constructed narrative. Most messages are. I think most news outlets, they construct the narrative and the message that they want to give. It's more extreme in North Korea, absolutely. But when you say that the language on these flyers might be dated, the YouTube videos are pretty slick that they're putting out. It's a pretty slick operation that they've got, and it's soft, and they're using attractive young females. And if you were to watch that, you would go, well, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Because not everybody is going to have a hugely critical mind on the internet. You scroll through, you look at something, and that's your impression. It's like South Korea has Hallyu. right? It has the Korean wave. We know what really goes on in South Korea sometimes. There are problems. There are problems related to the punishment for people committing sex crimes, digital sex crimes, which is ridiculous. That's really in the news. We know the growing economic inequality. We know the abuse of power and gapjil. We know all the problems in South Korea. You don't see them in the dramas, though. Mm-hmm. You don't see them in the K-pop.
No, of course. I mean, these are not the things that would want to be talked of, right? That's for those who want to search. So the point I was trying to make was with these guys going in is that the videos that would be published by North Korea on YouTube would also be catered in a way. So, yeah. I mean, what you would see would probably not be the reality. It would be a manicured form of, of a desired reality of whatever, whatever people would want to see, kind of thing. And YouTube has a certain language, right? YouTube has a certain clientele, so to speak. There is a certain type of demographic that watches YouTube for the most part. And I guess creating content for that particular demographic is what they're aiming at. I know that I know there's a lot of English influx. I've seen documentaries of young people in North Korea basically speaking fluent English with, and they were being recorded inside a state-of-the-art library with state-of-the-art computers by their standards, but looking from the outside, all these devices of, publicity were very outdated. But yet this young person spoke, like I said, fluent Korean. And I mean, Kim Jong-un himself, didn't he study in Harvard or something like that? So
no, he did study in Harvard. He studied in Switzerland.
Oh yeah, Switzerland. Close enough.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make is that
it's a good job you got me on this evening, Jack.
It's not unheard of, places like the leaders to be trained in a certain way in order to be presented in a certain way, while the rest of the population is well beyond the means of being put on TV. And I guess that's the story that's always been presented about North Korea, right? That Pyongyang is a very manicured place, and only the cream of the crop are, get to live the special privileged lifestyles, and those are the people that are kind of like the marionettes, of the regime. And so I would assume
I wouldn't say marionettes. I think that does them a discredit. I think that they are autonomous human beings. I don't think they're puppets that are on display. They're real people with families, lives, and dreams. So just to cut in there, I wouldn't call them marionettes. They're real people.
No, of course they're real people, but I mean they get to live the privileged life. Only because they adhere to the requirements that are posed to them. I mean, not anybody would get to go. Like, you probably would have to have a certain look, and you most certainly would need to be member of the Communist Party, right? An outlaw, so to speak, would not be...
It's based on the Songbun system, Jack. So they have the Songbun, which measures it into three main classes. You can divide it into about 50 others, but there are three classes in North Korean society. And just before I go into this, that was very natural before Japanese colonization and Western democracy was introduced to South Korea, the Korean peninsula. The natural way of life here, the Gabo reforms were 1984, which sought to abolish slavery. But South Korea was a hierarchical society. You had the Yangban at the top, you had the Jungin, you had the Nobi, but it was hierarchical, and you could see which people were which based on what they wore. So you had the Yangbans with the black cats, and it was like that. And for them, that's natural. That's how they lived. The idea that everybody is free, everybody is equal, where do we get that idea from? This is a very deep political question. First, it was everybody's equal under God. Well, we don't believe in God anymore, so we'll create like natural rights with John Locke. Well, we'll call them human rights. Human rights are a story. Human rights aren't a physical reality. We do that to equalize society, and it brings us certain benefits. North Korea are still living, to a certain degree, the way that they were living before Japan and the West came. And now, if we want to support people to live the way they want without imperialism, we would be supporting North Korea's way of life. Their way of life is exactly what kind of, to a degree, Plato. Oh, my light's just gone out. Should we have the midnight version? Here we go. Hang on.
You're getting some light from your screen, actually.
There we go. Anyway.
You forgot to drop in the quarter again there, huh?
Yeah, no, it's my disco thing. Plato's Republic, the cornerstone of Western civilization, right? Plato's Republic.
Yeah.
He advocated a society developed into three parts, hierarchical, based on a lie. And that's what North Korean society is. So the people that live in Pyongyang in this top Songbun, right? They are the loyal class, and they're there if their family showed allegiance to the Kim family when they were resisting Japanese colonization. Below that, you have a wavering class, and they have the possibilities of moving up and down. Maybe they have a relative in the past that's done something. At the bottom, you have the hostile class, and these are people whose parents or family have done something negative towards the state. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, the elites, the loyal, they live in Pyongyang, and it's like the old feudal system. And then the wavering class will live a little bit further out, and then the hostile class will live right out in the mountains and receive no support and have really devilishly difficult conditions, just like societies used to be in Europe, those feudal states where you wanted to be close to the physical center of power. And the interesting thing is that it's collective punishment. So if your brother does something bad, then you're punished as well for it, which makes us look at defectors in a different way, because when people like Tae Yong-ho, or when people do defect, they're often giving up their family to be sent to the hostile class, to be sent out to the... And that creates a huge moral question. But the people that live in Pyongyang, the elites, the high Songbun, they're not marionettes, they're not puppets. They're people with dreams and lives, and they live there. Now, we don't like the sound of that society in our modern words of democracy and freedom, but it's not real. It's natural to them. Of course, Marxism or communism is not natural. That was invented by Karl Marx and Engels in London. But the idea of a structured hierarchical society is not, in the history of the world, it's not that weird, I would say. And who are we to say that they're not allowed to do it? The 2005 United Nations responsibility to protect. So it's a 2005 United Nations thing, which most nations signed up to agree with, that a state can do whatever it wants inside its borders, as long as it is not causing genocide or famine. No one else can touch it. And that's what international relations is based on. And they're not really causing genocide or famine. And so do we say that you must be a democracy, otherwise we're going to bomb you? Well, that doesn't seem very nice of us. Yeah.
No, so I agree with that. I don't think democracy is the perfect state anyway either. But so let's get back to a little bit to what's on the news, and what can we expect, I guess. Do you think that the reunification will ever come to fruition? I personally don't think. My personal perception was that North Korea kind of provided a perfect buffer between, the very communist or I don't know, whatever type of communism China is, and then, South Korea. And kind of North Korea provided this buffer that's kind of like a friendly state or on the verge of reunification. But, this prevents an immediate border with democratic South Korea or possibly Korea and the communist country of China. That would be a problematic state. So I never actually really saw the reunification of North and South really happening. And like you said, I guess this is just kind of a, for show which occurs every election.
Why should it happen? Why should North Korea and South Korea unite? That's the question. I would say that when you see proposals from President Moon and his administration that say they're going to bid for the 2032 Olympics and the 2030 World Cup, that means that they believe in 2032, 12 years down the line, the two countries are still going to be separated. They don't envisage. Well, no, it does if you think about it. When they do a co-host bid for that, they're saying in 12 years, we don't expect to be together. Now, the first question would be, well, why should they be unified? Just because they're the same ethnicity, the same minjok? Minjok sort of is a difficult word, but it's what the Koreans use for race or people. It was invented by Shin Chae-ho in an effort to unite and give a national consciousness in the face of Japanese and Western imperialism. And yes, the Koreans are a homogenous people, but they're becoming less homogenous. They never were 100% homogenous. Of course, there's been Chinese and Japanese and Mongolian. They didn't just stay in one little place and only breed with each other. That would be ridiculous. But now that's changing. So what would be the justification? Just because we're the same race? So do we want nations built on race? That doesn't seem like the way forward. Surely we want nations that are built on collective culture. We want nations that are built on a shared identity. There has to be something that unites it. But the movement in the West is all about multiculturalism. So advocating a combined Korea based on race, that seems problematic in the modern discourse. Still might be possible. Do we advocate Korea on it's their destiny? Well, the three kingdoms were divided. They've spent a lot of time divided. The Koreas are kind of used to it. Maybe to be divided is their destiny. And I'm just not sure that when I show my students the Vietnam War, it really gets their mind working, because they watch the Vietnam War and they watch Ho Chi Minh and they see what happens. They see that Vietnam was colonized by the French. They see that Vietnam was colonized then by the Japanese and then by the French again. And then the Americans come in and they go, well, these guys had a really horrible time at the hands of everything. And then the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese obviously call the Vietnam War the American War. That lasted for 20 years. Now, the culmination of the Vietnamese War, and the Vietnam was divided north to south, yeah? Hanoi, the communist north with Ho Chi Minh, and then the Saigon, the south, supported by America. What was the result of that 20-year battle?
Nothing much happened there, right?
No, the communists won and they united the country.
Right.
That's what happened. We don't tell that story. Why don't we tell that story? Because, geez, that couldn't happen here. We don't tell that story because it doesn't fit into our narrative that everything's going to win. In that 20-year war, America gives up and goes home, and the communists unite the country.
Right.
So we don't tell that story because we don't allow those possibilities. Now, I'm not sitting here suggesting that that's what I want to happen in the Korean Peninsula. I'm just trying to suggest that we only think in certain ways that are expedient to our own survival, but history doesn't work like that. Politics doesn't work like that. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't see the Korean Peninsula being unified anytime soon. But if you want to look for a similar example, Vietnam would be a close one. It has so many similarities. Ho Chi Minh and Kim Il-sung, great friends. You see photos of Kim Il-sung and Ho Chi Minh together, and if you show them to a Korean, the Korean will go, that's Kim Jong-un. They look exactly the same at those parts of their life. Now, we don't talk about that much. Of course, there are differences, but there are great similarities. And when the South Koreans watch that and they kind of get a feeling, it was Ken Burns' documentary, great documentary on Vietnam. It was on Netflix, but they took it off. When the South Korean students, I've shown that in history class, they watch that and they go, I kind of support Ho Chi Minh there, you know? He's trying to kick out the imperialists. He's trying to kick out... And then you tell them that in your country, that would be North Korea, and then they get a bit weirded out.
Right.
There's a conversation to be had. There's a conversation about what transpired in the past. The two Koreas still dehumanize each other. They still use each other as their own other, but they haven't really looked in the mirror, and maybe they can't because they're still in a nation building part of their development. And when you're building a nation, you have to erect leaders and anthems. You know, this is our flag, this is our song, these are our heroes, support ours. So I don't see unification happening anytime soon. I don't know why it should be advocated because, like I say, the United Kingdom has diplomatic relations, and we see from a state level. Of course, we don't agree with what the DPRK does in terms of human rights and freedom of speech and missile tests. We don't agree with it, but we accept it as their right to do that as a sovereign state.
So what is the end result of that? So, if reunification is not happening, why this dancing? Is it just for control? I don't know, having a military present and having people scared and obeying the higher powers? I mean, if why not just drop the act and leave it?
Imagine you're president of South Korea and you could meet... Well, here's an interesting thing. Ex-President Park Geun-hye went to Pyongyang and met with the Kim family before she was president. Okay. But nobody knows that. Now, they tried to assassinate her father and killed her mother. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty heavy thing. She went up there and met with them. Not many people know that. Not a big deal. Bill Clinton went there. We all know Dennis Rodman went there. Now, when South Koreans see the president going to North Korea and doing those things, it elevates him to a level above the national citizens. Right. He becomes special. He can, or she, whoever it might be, the president can go there. The normal people can't go there. The president is responsible, so please look up to him. He or she has this special responsibility, and all the citizens, this is not for you. So it legitimizes and elevates the role of the president. However, it does that at the expense of the citizens. If you really want these two Koreas to come together, get the citizens involved, get the citizens talking about it, give the citizens political activism or in this conversation, not just leave it to the elites, because the elites do it, in my opinion, to cement their own legacy in history. So that's why the dance is happening, I think, Jack. And yeah, elites have to do that. That's what they want. But I see it as hypocritical. I see it as they're not really working for unification. I don't think maybe even Kim Dae-jung was with the Sunshine Policy. What they're really doing is they're looking for their own legitimacy and their own legacy. And they only want unification to happen on very specific terms that they know are probably very implausible in the way that they're being discussed.
It's almost like you saying that kind of nullifies everything else about the president. If this is the only way to kind of create a legacy, being able to go to a place where no other citizen can go, rather than creating something meaningful for their own citizens, then that's, yeah, it's I don't know, kind of a sad thing, and something that I would definitely see done by politicians.
Well, that's the conservatives get angry because they think that the current ruling party, Double Minjudang, are putting their all attention up north and not here. The country is filled with problems. We're trying to get anti-discrimination law through. There's loads of problems with the nth room and surrounding issues keep coming out with digital sex crimes. There's gapjil, there's suicides keep happening and bullying, and get somebody focused on that. Get somebody that says, let's leave the North. The North can do that, and we're going to put our energy and our focus on these people. My recent article this week, I said that Lee Hyori should be president. If Kanye can be president in the United States, get Lee Hyori for president here, because maybe she won't really care too much about North Korea. She'll care about what's going on with the people in their real lives, and it might not give some great legacy that the international media are going to talk about, but it might be better for the people.
Right. And that's something that's never going to happen.
Well, no, I would suggest you don't know, because South Korea has done so many things and it never ceases to amaze and surprise me. It sounds like I'm being very critical of the government, and that's a good thing about South Korean society, that I can do that. I wouldn't have been able to do that in the 1970s, the 1980s. So it shows the development of South Korea. It's becoming more and more open. I think if you look at Twitter or social media, you would think that the country is going to hell in a handcart, that everything's going terrible. I don't believe it is. I think it's getting better. I am a little bit critical of the administration regards North Korea, but in general, the administration has made the country feel better. It has handled COVID-19 I'm glad I'm in South Korea for the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, right, sure.
Rather than in the United Kingdom. And a lot of that goes to the current administration, President Moon, jong-un, the doctor that you always see, the head of control, Kang Kyung-hwa, the team that he's built around them. So, yeah, I do have criticisms, but it is capable of getting better. The thing that I find really interesting, just regarding that with jong-un and Kang Kyung-hwa, etc., the Orientalist view from the West of Asia is that it's based on nepotism, that positions are given without people earning them. You give the positions to your family members, you give your positions to people you know, and moreover, it's based on age and seniority. Look at the United States. President Trump's got all his family in there.
Sure.
Look at President Moon here. He's got a team that's handling this situation well. It's no wonder that President Trump and Chairman Kim get on well. They're doing the same thing. They're putting their families in charge. The United States and North Korea have got some things. So it is possible that this country will get better. The people are amazingly resilient. The story of South Korea has not been written. I often say that South Korea has the possibility of being a beacon of good things, not only in Northeast Asia, but in the world, because you've got China. Fair enough, and I'm not going to put too many subjective comments on it, but we know China is a single state party. You don't vote for Xi Jinping. The Chinese Communist Party choose the leader, and that happens. You've got Russia just to the north. Putin's changing the constitution so he can be president for however long he can ride horses with his shirt off. North Korea, we know. Japan. South Korea has the opportunity to say, we'll take the lead. We'll be the country in this part of the world that will shine a light, that will say, this is where the future can happen. This is where progressive stuff can happen. And it's kind of doing that, but it could do better. It could do a lot better, but relative compared to what's going on, I think South Korea is pretty good. Maybe certain minorities would disagree with me. Maybe I'm saying that from my position of white privilege, but relative to anywhere else in the region, this place has the possibility to do great things, and it has the people to do it. Yeah.
I'm a strong believer that when it comes to politics and countries being nations, things are as good as they need to be and no more. And I guess that kind of leans towards the conspiratorial agenda. I personally don't really believe that, governments are have the best intentions of the people in mind.
You think all governments are the same?
No, on some level, on certain levels, yeah. On certain levels, yes. So like for example, you mentioned Trump and Kim Jong-un get on well because they're doing the same thing. And that's kind of what I mean. Obviously there are democracies and there are isms. But in the end, governments and the people elected, they are elected because they support a certain agenda or they satisfy a certain mold of expectations, and whatever they are, they will either follow a certain agenda or be the I don't know, not necessarily puppets, but I mean Trump, he fits in somewhere. He does something right that satisfies certain people. Of course, his whatever he does will piss off a bunch of other people, but he's there for a reason. And I don't necessarily think that he's been elected by the people. And I think that's how it goes with the government. But this is my cynical opinion of governments in general. You know what I mean? So,
if you read the Korean press in Korean, this is quite of a weird one to go. So I said Trump has similarities with Kim Jong-un and putting people, family members, in positions of power. Yeah. The current ruling party in South Korea, they're pretty nationalist. They bang that nationalist drum and they create the enemy. Let's fight against Japan and let's do this. 대한민국, 우리 민족, 우수합니다. They do that here. You might not notice it as much. And, when white people bang a nationalist drum, when we see the United Kingdom or England or America doing this, we get scared, right? When we see Basque, when we see Catalonians, when we see Scotland, smaller countries doing it, we're like, yeah, go you. It's the same sentiment. It's the same feeling. It arises in all people, and it's manipulated by politicians for their own political gain. But it doesn't just happen in certain people. That's a natural thing. That's part of the tribe. Now, in terms of what you said about political leaders, I like the work of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I like the work of Henry David Thoreau. I like the work of the Transcendentalists, because they believe that we exist before the state. Humans existed prior to the state existing.
Right.
Now, we kind of see the state as this eternal entity that will always be there. But we existed before the state. As humans, we created the state. Essentially, we are better than the state, because the state will be people that are driven by various peccadillos, idiosyncrasies. We have the possibility as an individual of living our lives very, very well. The state doesn't. So we're superior. So we shouldn't obey the state too well, they say. Now, their final point on that is that the state is a reflection of the humans in the country. The country gets the state that it deserves. The state doesn't control the people. The state is like a mirror. So if you were to add up all the moral qualities of the people in the state, that's what the state becomes. So it's a weird argument, but they believe that if all the people start becoming better people, then the state will become better. You don't start by changing the state. You start by changing the individuals. It's bottom up. And I really believe there's a lot to say in that. The second point I would make is that take New Zealand. Right? They've got Jacinda Ardern. Look at the Scandinavian countries, electing a young 35-year-old female as well that was raised by lesbian parents listening to Rage Against the Machine. It is possible, and countries are doing it. Yes, there is political stagnation in the West. You've got the Republicans and the Democrats refusing to hand over power, but you can get young, competent people. So let's just take New Zealand very quickly. You've got Jacinda Ardern there, done a fantastic job, united the country, been a great leader, young female. It shouldn't matter that she's a female. If you put Trump or Johnson in charge of New Zealand during that, would they have coped with COVID-19 as well as they've done? I would suggest no. Conversely, if you put Jacinda Ardern in charge of the United Kingdom or the United States or other places, would they have done better? I would suggest yes. So it's about the quality of the leader that we elect. And you get the leader that you deserve sometimes. Now, that sounds a bit harsh, that maybe we have to look at ourselves. Maybe we have to look at not just blaming the elites all the time and wagging our fingers, but maybe we have to say, well, we elected those people. Right. We put them in charge. If we decided we're not playing your game, we're going to do something different, we would have different leaders. So bringing that to South Korea, they came out in record numbers, 65% for the last national election, and they seem to have a healthy view. They could start voting. You've got women's parties now, the Yosongidang, you've got the Jongidang, the Justice Party looking for anti-discrimination. If people really believe in those things, it could happen. The Justice Party are trying to get anti-discrimination laws through Parliament, so you can't just start firing people for being minority or for being gay. Should be a given. That should exist in a society. I would support that. Where are the celebrities supporting that? Why aren't all the celebrities, Korean celebrities, came out and went Black Lives Matter? They put all that Blackout Tuesday on their Twitter because it's over there in their own country. I don't see them doing it. So when they start doing it here, the government will change. So it's about changing the people. I put my attention, Jack, on the individuals in society, not the state itself. So I have a little bit more of an optimistic view because I know that we can change individuals. Change them, you change the state.
Yeah, possibly. But if that's the case, then why aren't people speaking out more and doing what you suggest they should be doing?
They are. It doesn't happen overnight. Look what happened in the French Revolution. Happens overnight and you go to the terror and you get the guillotine, killing 40,000 people and you get the cult of reason. It's true.
Right.
Doesn't happen overnight. What view of Korea are you taking? Because 10 years ago, people didn't talk about gapjil. Now you can say, hey, I got gapjiled by my boss and I don't accept it anymore. not everyone's doing it, but slowly and slowly these things are happening. I think for the people that champion it to happen really quickly, it's better to have a little bit of a historical perspective and realize what does happen when these things happen too quickly. And when you demand blind allegiance to a cult, that's very, very dangerous, and it leads to the opposite of what you want if you study history. But you take a broad perspective, and I believe that this country is getting better. 15 years ago when I came here, there wasn't much. Now there are gay community. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but now there are gay communities at the universities. This is Seoul Women's University. And they have to go to chapel once a semester, right? And they all have to do this. There's gay communities here now.
Right.
Because they're feeling free, they're feeling open. They're not. 20, 30 years ago, people worry about getting a knock on the door and being dragged over to Namsan. It's not anymore. It's getting better.
Right. Okay. Well, what else is there to say? We started off with. Sorry.
Get better. That's what there is to say. Don't focus on sorting yourself out before you sort other people out. That's what we should all do. And if South Koreans do that, if they focus on all becoming better people themselves rather than attacking other people, trying to make yourself the better person, like the invisible hand or something, it all starts working out.
Absolutely. We just need to determine individually on what it means to be a better person, right? And I think that's where the problem comes in, because just like, getting the different feeds from different TV stations, news stations, people have different perceptions of what such labels mean, and they'll act accordingly, right? Yeah. Which is why we've got the messes that we have and don't seem to be going anywhere. Well, not anywhere, but maybe not quickly enough. Or maybe that's a good thing, right? Like you said. Maybe. All right. David, thanks a lot. It's been an hour. I think we've hit it on an hour, right on the nose, I believe.
Excellent.
This was a fantastic talk, man. Really good talking to you. Very well discussed and very well read individual. If you guys are new here, listening right now or past recording, make sure to follow us. And if you haven't seen the whole thing, go back to the beginning and rewatch it, because there's a lot of good information that David just fed us here. So have a look at that. And yeah, I think you had very good closing. So I'm not even going to ask you if you have any last words, but if you do.
No, that's good.
All right. Thanks a lot, David. Thanks again. Wish you all the best, man. Good luck with your further work.
Thanks, Jack. It was great speaking to you. See you again soon, mate.
Likewise. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Right. And so that's it from David for tonight. And thank you all for tuning in. This was a very, very good, very educational talk. I've learned a lot, definitely. What else? Yeah. I hope that you enjoyed this short little conversation. Mostly more of a monologue, really, than a dialogue. David's got a lot more to say on the topic than I do, so it was very good in listening to him. We'll keep you updated on the next thing that's coming up for living in Korea. There will be a video coming up, I guess, next Friday. I'm really busy with everything else, so I keep the updates and releases to a minimum, 2 videos a week. Today's podcast, and next Friday is going to be a regular release for the Live in Korea channel. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. And I hope to see you on the next week's podcast. Have a good night. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next Friday. Bye bye.